Well, good morning. I'm Lauren Gadetti with BIT Services, and we welcome you today to our webinar, Is My Business Really Vulnerable to Cyber Attack? We're going to be looking at answering that question today. I've got with me Cliff Etheridge, President of BIT Services, and John McMichael with Anderson Insurance Associates, and we're excited to be talking to you today. I want to go ahead and get started. Today's webinar has been geared towards small and medium business owners, especially those whose insurance companies have already come to them with a list of cybersecurity requirements. That scenario is popping up more and more over the next year coming up. So it's going to be really important to all business owners today. So let's go ahead and get started. Cliff, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in IT?
Sure. I'm Cliff Etheridge. I'm the owner of BIT Services. We're an IT services company here in Aiken. We help small and medium businesses with their IT. I've got about 25 years experience in IT, both from small environments all the way up to enterprise. So quite a range.
Great. John, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience with insurance?
Yes. Well, I started my career in the insurance industry about 39 years ago, and worked for the companies for a number of years on the underwriting, claims, disaster management side, and marketing. And in 2008, decided I was going to get into the independent agency market, where I could really help people and not just write policies. So my background has been working with commercial businesses and personal business. So we enjoy working with companies to help them meet all their risk requirements.
Thank you both. Cliff, can you tell us a little bit about why we're having this conversation today? Why is cybersecurity the topic of the day?
Sure. So why are we talking about this now? There's been a huge increase in both the number of attacks and the financial damage that's done through those attacks. It's worldwide, but also locally. In CSRA, there have been quite a number of attacks over the past couple of years. The average ransomware payment is up something like 3 times over the past year. 3/4 of organizations have now been hit with a business email compromise in the past year, actually. And the FBI says there's a 65% increase in the amount of money lost to those business email compromises over the past 2 years. There's also a rising response cost for each individual incident that takes place. Not only is there the ransomware financial loss, there's also money that needs to be paid to legal experts, to IT experts, and specialists to come in and do some forensics after the incident takes place to find out what's going on. So there's quite a bit of cost, even with an individual incident. And the reality is most of these attacks are preventable with some basic security measures. Ultimately, the target has changed. It used to be that large businesses were attacked, or there were broad-based attacks against individuals. But now scammers are targeting small and medium businesses for a number of reasons. They know that there's little or no security on small and medium business networks. Small businesses have enough to think about already. You know, they're not thinking about cybersecurity. It's just another thing to do on their list. So the scammers know this, and they targeted those folks. There's not as much awareness on the part of staff in small and medium businesses of the severity of the attacks or how the attacks take place. So the seriousness of the threat is kind of undermined. Small businesses typically work on the idea that it can't happen to them. They're too small. They fly under the radar. Nobody really wants to target them because they don't have as much money in the bank, but none of those things are the case. A lot of ransoms now are between $100,000 and $200,000. Some are even less. The scammers actually tailor the ransom to the size of the business anymore. $50,000 is fine with them if it only takes them 4 hours of work. You can just work out that math. That's very well worth it. So it's easy money for scammers, these small and medium businesses that simply don't have the cybersecurity in place. So we're finding that insurance companies are actually going back to their current clients and new clients that they're bringing on, asking them to fill out a cybersecurity assessment before they will renew the policy, or for new clients before they will bring on a new policy. If it didn't happen this past year, it's likely to happen this upcoming year when they come back for your business insurance renewal. Insurance companies have paid out millions of dollars of ransom over the past couple of years. You know about some of the big ones, Colonial Pipeline. There's a number of them that have been paid out, but there are a lot of unreported ones that are smaller. Insurance companies are looking to protect themselves, so they're coming and putting the onus back on clients to maintain just some basic cybersecurity and cyber hygiene to keep themselves secure. So we're kind of looking to answer the question, is my business really vulnerable to these kind of things, and what do I need to do to be secure?
Yeah, John, do you have anything to add to this right now?
Yeah, Cliff is exactly right. To get cyber insurance coverage several years ago, let's just say 3 years ago, all you had to do was sit down with your agent and fill out an application, answer some questions, and send it in, and coverage was there. Well, it's not that way now. I'll give you an example. It's just like insuring a home. You're going to send somebody out to look at the home to see if it's safe, if it needs any repairs, just what the risk is to the insurance company. Well, they're doing the same thing now. They're sending out people to evaluate the different vulnerabilities in the businesses, depending on what the type business is. So they're doing their own cyber assessment before they underwrite the policy, and it's a big deal. There have been claims recently that have been denied because that process wasn't followed. The answers on the applications weren't met. Then they had a loss, and the adjuster looked at the application and said, well, you answered you had this in place, this in place, this in place, when in fact you didn't. So guess what? You failed the first part of this contract that you would provide those things, and you didn't. So we're not going to pay your claim. And it happens more often than not, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Cliff, can you give us maybe some firsthand accounts of this happening locally in Aiken?
Sure, and I should also add that we've also heard of claims being denied, just the same as John just mentioned. We've also heard of claims being denied because the form wasn't filled out correctly to start with. So it's not a matter of just checking off the boxes. You really have to make sure that you're covered for what you're saying that you're doing. So yes, this is a story of something that happened in Aiken. There was one morning the practice manager for a small medical office in Aiken came into her desk, and she turned on her computer and started their practice management software. And a message popped up on the screen that said, your data has been encrypted. You owe us a ransom of so many Bitcoin is how they typically look to get the ransom. And you must pay it in 24 hours or else you won't get your data back. So she tried to go around to some other computers in the office and see if she could access the data. But the malicious software had encrypted the data actually on the server, so there was no way to access it from any of the other computers in the office. They weren't able to process payments. They weren't able to bill or schedule or do anything with their software for their patients. In doing some forensics after the fact, it turns out that what had happened was that one of the staff members had gotten an email the day before, and the email had said, we tried to deliver a package. This is UPS. Please click on this link so that you can reschedule your package delivery since you weren't there to pick it up the first time. So they had a minor panic, and they clicked on the link to see if they could reschedule this package redelivery. Nothing happened when they clicked on the link. The web page didn't pop up, so they just figured, well, we'll worry about it tomorrow, and they didn't do anything else. But what happened after that was that the software that got installed when they clicked on the link that they didn't know about waited until after hours. This is a pretty common tactic now. It waited until after hours and then encrypted the entire patient database. All of their data got encrypted on the network. And that's a common tactic, by the way, for this encryption software to wait till after hours or wait until a weekend or even a holiday. A lot of the most recent attacks in the past 18 months have happened over holidays. And this software is programmed to wait until there's nobody in the office, or even more particularly, not only till there's nobody in the office, but no IT staff available to help. So that's just kind of an aside. cyber criminals will stay in a network for, I think the average is like 10 days now, but it can even be longer, gathering data before they actually run their attack. In this case, by the time the staff arrived the next day, all the data was encrypted and nobody had access to it. As an aside, the common wisdom is that paying the ransom is not typically recommended because there's no guarantee the hacker will give your data back. And it also puts you on the list for further attacks in the future. But the reality is, even in some of the most high profile cases, companies have paid the ransom, not just to get their data back, but so that they could get up and running in a timely manner. And some of the big ones, they've actually had a backup of their data, but it would have taken so many days to get back up. It was faster for them to pay millions of dollars in ransom to get their data back up quicker. So that they've actually done that. It's common for those guys to pay the ransom. This kind of points out the need for backup, how backup is actually a critical part of your strategy, not only for disaster recovery from flood or fire, but also from cyber attack. Backup is the only way to get your data back if you get ransomed in that way. The silver lining to this story is that company did in fact take their backup seriously. Their backup was being monitored and tested regularly. So they were able to restore from backup. Now they were down for a few days, so they lost that time and money. And then they actually had to pay for some hardware. They didn't want to try and recover back onto hardware that had already had an infection. So new hardware was purchased, and then the data was copied back onto that new hardware. As one more aside about the importance of backup, that's the only way to recover from those ransomware attacks. So the cyber criminals also know this, and they have built into their programs software that goes out to try and destroy the backup prior to ransoming people's data. That's one of the first things that happens in that time period when they're just kind of lurking on the network for those 10 days. Is they're trying to find backup, and they're trying to destroy that backup because that really increases the chance that their victim will have to pay ransom. So the old way of just running some backup software, making sure that it runs every day, those days are over. There's a lot that has to be done with backup. It needs to be secured, needs to be encrypted. There need to be 3 copies of the data. One of them needs to be offsite. That backup actually needs to be restored pretty frequently to make sure that all the bits are in place. So backup's just kind of a critical part of that strategy for security. So ultimately, that office did recover their data. They were able to continue their as a practice, but they did lose several days and quite a bit of money trying to get that data recovered.
So with this, John, do you have a story maybe from your experience you could share with us?
Well, one of the things that is interesting about cyber is not only the things that come from without, but sometimes things that come from within. And we talk about, I know Cliff and I have talked about this in the past, but there's social engineering that goes on out there. This didn't happen in Aiken, but it did happen in South Carolina. The story it didn't happen to one of my clients, but I was told the story from another agent that a customer had their system hacked. What happened? They traced it down as somebody came into an office and they managed to get into the back office during lunchtime when the people were coming in and out. And they were able to get past the receptionist back in there because the person looked like they were part of this group, and they made small talk with people as they went in. And as they got in there, what they did is they took a thumb drive, and they took the thumb drive and put it on someone's desk. And then they mingled around a while, and then they left. Well, you know what people are going to do in an office? They took the thumb drive and they said, well, whose is this? And nobody could claim it. They said, well, I'll just plug it in the system and see whose it is. And so as soon as they did that, then of course the catch was made, and the ransomware was put into the system. And like Cliff mentioned earlier, it didn't happen right away. It took there was a timer on it, and it happened several months later. And by then they were able to get a lot of information. So when it really was taken over, they could really do the worst harm with it that they could. And so you just never know what people are going to do. telephone calls are another one that people will call in an office and get all kinds of information from somebody that happens to answer the telephone, and they strike up a relationship. And people are friendly in the South. They're more than willing to give information, and so they get a lot of information, and all of a sudden they'll call back in later and get some more and some more, and then they can craft emails so that they can get the most out of it, and they can get somebody to bite on an email with a phishing program. So those are the kind of things that we're seeing very prevalent now.
That's a good reminder, just to be on the lookout for those calls coming in too. Yeah, so Cliff, do you have another local story?
Yeah, so this is one that I like to tell frequently because it happened in Aiken. It was a big money loss. So real estate transactions have become huge targets for hackers. There's a number of reasons for it. The first reason is most people are using insecure email. They're not using business grade email. And that's just a huge security hole. Those real estate transactions most often involve moving money by wire. And there are several different parties involved in the transaction, and the conversation about that transaction is taking place by email. The attack can take place from anywhere in the world. So many of these hackers are in Eastern Europe or China or Russia. They can just sit on their computer from thousands of miles away, watch these email messages go back and forth, and then right when the transaction goes to close, they can actually execute an attack. So it's becoming more and more common. In this particular case, somebody was buying a piece of real estate in Aiken County. They got a call from the attorney on the day of closing saying, "Hey, we didn't get your down payment yet. Can you wire that money over to us this morning so we can go ahead and close this afternoon?" The buyer was confused. They said, "Yes, I sent that wire yesterday. I responded to your email." And the attorney said, "Well, we didn't send an email yesterday." And the buyer said, "Yes, you sent me an email saying that your wiring instructions had changed and to wire the money to the new address. So I wired it to that address yesterday." By this time, both of them could tell something was wrong. So they went and looked in their bank accounts, and the money had indeed left the buyer's account and it never got to the attorney's account. What happens in these wire fraud transactions is as soon as the money is transferred from your account to the scammer's account, the scammer just moves it to a third or a fourth account. And because those accounts can be anywhere in the world, there's no recovering that money. Once it's gone, it's gone. And in this case, that's what happened. The money was gone. No money was ever recovered. What happens with this type of attack is that a scammer can get into one of these free email accounts. And unfortunately, there are a lot of businesses that still use these free email accounts. Somebody like Atlantic Broadband uses Yahoo for their email backend and has for a long time. Yahoo has been breached countless times over the past 10 years. So whether it's the real estate agent or the buyer using one of these free accounts, if the hacker gets into that account, they just sit for weeks and months and watch transactions go across. In this case, right before the purchase went to close, the scammer copied the attorney's email signature information and sent an email to the buyer pretending to be the attorney. They had all the information right in that email thread, and told the buyer that they needed to send the down payment to a new wire address. And again, by the time they figured out what was going on, that money was gone. So this one doesn't have a silver lining. That was tens of thousands of dollars that was just lost. Among other things, this incident points out the desperate need for email security. A lot of people, again, still think you can run free email. You simply can't run a business like that on free email anymore. It's not secure. And it doesn't matter whether you're large or small or even just an independent businessman. It's just too dangerous to run on free email. Securing your email with two-form authentication is another piece that's become critical. It's not a luxury anymore. It's really something that needs to be done on all your accounts. So again, with this one, there's no silver lining. There was a lot of money lost. Nobody ever got that money back. There were court cases and everything else. So it was a mess.
John, in this case, have you seen anything like this, or do you have anything you want to share too?
Right. It's really funny that you picked that particular case to mention, because just in the paper this past weekend, there was an article. Well, at least it came across my computer anyway. So there was a couple that was in North Carolina. They were buying a house in North Myrtle Beach, their retirement home, and they got a call from a third-party hacker that had gotten into the real estate agent's emails, and this couple was suing the real estate agent and the attorney because they had been given some false information on where to wire the funds, just like you talked about earlier, Cliff. And they lost all the money. They're not being able to get it back. So there's a lawsuit now pending against the attorney and the real estate firm. And that's why cyber insurance is so important to cover these things. It's not only the direct damages they get themselves, but also the liability issues that are that follow being hacked or the loss of information or the information getting out. So there are many, many different levels of that.
Cliff, do you have any other local stories maybe that we can talk about too?
Sure. This one is also a medical provider that was in Aiken, also in Aiken. This one was a larger medical provider, several doctors and quite a bit of nursing and admin staff. They had a number of computers and laptops in their office, and they used a cloud-hosted electronic medical records provider. So their EMR software that they ran their business on day to day was hosted in the cloud. And the reason they went that way is to prevent having all of the costs associated with servers in-house. They didn't want the capital expenditure of having servers. They didn't want to have to maintain those, and they didn't want to have to deal with the security, because there's quite a bit of security with medical providers. They also have a HIPAA burden, so there's even more security that needs to be in place. And by outsourcing their EMR software to a third-party provider, they can put that burden on somebody else. Now, there still is a burden for the provider themselves to make sure that their vendor is doing what they say they're doing. But by going with a cloud-hosted provider, they can put a lot of that burden on somebody else. One Monday morning, and this was actually relatively recently, this wasn't too long ago, one Monday morning they came in and they were not able to access their EMR software. They couldn't, they couldn't see patients, they couldn't bill. And at first they thought it was an internet problem. So they started checking around in the office and they found out that no, they were able to connect to the internet. It wasn't a network or an internet problem. It was a problem with the EMR software. So they called in to let their provider know that they were having a problem, and they opened a ticket, and the provider took their information and said, well, we'll look into it and we'll give you a call back. One of the most immediate things was they couldn't bill. So they weren't able to bill, receive payments, do any of that stuff apart from even the patient information that they weren't able to access. After a couple hours, they hadn't heard anything back. So they contacted the company again to see what was going on. The company told them that the problem was being worked on, but they didn't have any further details. And they basically gave them a web page to go check for updates on the problem. They would not give them any details on what was going on. This went on all through Monday, all through Tuesday. Ultimately, they had an entire week where they were locked out of their software. They could not do anything for an entire week. They weren't able to process payments apart from all of the day-to-day patient scheduling as well. So they were given no information from their provider. Ultimately, the following week, they were told by the cloud hosting provider that a hacker had gotten into their system and had caused some damage, and they were not able to give information because they didn't want to compromise the investigation that was ongoing, which of course didn't help the doctor's office, that they were, needless to say, quite frustrated that they couldn't get any information. But the takeaway is that they had gone to a third-party provider hosting in the cloud on purpose in order that some of these things would be taken care of for them. They really thought that by doing that, they wouldn't be able to be hacked. And clearly they were still able, somebody was still able to hack them. And they were able to cause a lot of damage to their business by getting into this EMR software provider. The local doctor's office had thought that they would get kind of enterprise level security with this cloud hosted software. And in fact, they did have enterprise level security, but it doesn't matter what level. of security you have. We now tell people it's not if you get attacked, it's when. Everybody is going to get attacked. It's just a matter of when. Going to a sophisticated third-party vendor in the cloud did not prevent them getting breached and getting hacked. So it can happen anywhere at any time. Again, it's happening locally. It's happening frequently. There's nobody's flying beneath the radar. There's no immunity from cybercrime. It doesn't matter what size business you are. It's not a matter of if, but when.
John, do you have thoughts on that too?
Yes. One of the things that that is the most vulnerable is the fact that small businesses, like Cliff said very early on, are not protected, and they're not training their people either to look for things. And that's where the people part of it is from the management to the frontline folks. They're not being trained. So recently, I know one situation where somehow company was doing their normal bookkeeping, and they found out there was some unusual transactions taking place. Well, what had happened is somebody had gotten a hold of their routing number and their bank account number, and they had started taking some money out. They started taking out small amounts to see if they could do it, and then all of a sudden they started with some bigger funds. And the bank told them, they said, well, if individual has the routing number and the check number, and they have a little bit of information on the inside, then they can process it correctly. So we find that there's a recent survey done by the National Insurance Journal that said that only 14% of small businesses have a full measure of cyber insurance. So when these things happen, they have no recourse unless the bank will protect them, and that's up to the bank and the protection that they have offered in their contract when they open up a business account. So there are many, many ways that people are getting. Another way that they're doing it too from social engineering is that they'll call up and act like a vendor, and they'll offer free services. Let us do this. Let us run an evaluation of your system, and then we'll do this free for you, or we'll give you a huge discount. And it's usually something that most people want or need, and they use that as their hook to get in. And then once you let them in your system to start looking around, then they've got you. And it's a shame, but it happens every single day. People are vulnerable, and everybody likes a good deal. And like they said, the old saying goes, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. So the message that Cliff is putting out and that I'm putting out is be very careful. Look that gift horse in the mouth.
What do you think, Cliff, maybe are some of the big takeaways that we can walk away from this conversation with?
Sure. So, I mean, there's a number of things we could take away from the stories. One of the first ones is, again, many small business owners or many folks running nonprofits or medium-sized businesses think that they can't be a target. They're too small, and it doesn't matter how big your business is anymore. It doesn't matter how many employees you have. It doesn't matter how much money you transact. Everybody is vulnerable anymore. Again, a hacker is certainly going to spend 4 hours to get $50,000 from you. It's very well worth their time. They're tailoring those ransoms to the size of the business. So size doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. It happens in manufacturing, it happens in legal, it happens in medical, it happens in retail. It's happening everywhere. There's nobody that is immune from it. In fact, hackers are actually targeting smaller businesses, as I said at the beginning, because they know that those cybersecurity measures are not in place at smaller businesses. Just like John mentioned, with so few small businesses are thinking about their cyber insurance needs, they're not thinking about their cybersecurity needs either, and it makes it really easy for the cyber criminals. The other piece is training. A lot of folks think that we can just put some technical measures in place and that'll fix everything. And there's quite a bit that we can do technically to help mitigate some of these attacks. But the reality is a lot of it depends on people. And so if the hacker is able to get you to click on something, it doesn't matter what security is in place. If you make those decisions to click it, it doesn't matter. The security can't help you at that point. So training is a big piece of it, letting people know what to look out for, how to react when something happens, what to do if something does happen. John mentioned and Lauren mentioned the phone call. Phone calls will be made to an office as part of a coordinated attack to just get little pieces of information. Hey, I know the boss is going out of town in June. I can't remember the dates. Can you give me those dates? And as soon as the hacker knows that, they can coordinate an attack that week when the boss is out of the office, pretending to be the boss. And we've actually seen this happen in Aiken, where an email sent out to staff or to the congregation of a church or to, again, the staff of a nonprofit, pretending to be the boss, saying that, hey, there's a sick child with cancer. Can you go buy these gift cards for them and send them such and such address? And by the way, it's urgent. Can you go do it right now today? That's actually happened in Aiken. So the training piece, just helping people know what to do in case of these odd things, odd emails coming in. Again, the money piece is another thing. Businesses think that we don't have millions of dollars in the bank, so I'm not a target. Another story that I tell, this one wasn't in Aiken, but it wasn't too far away. A law office with 2 lawyers in it. A hacker got into their network. They just kind of browsed around for a couple of weeks, but they got a full financial picture of that office and how it worked. So when they actually executed the ransom attack, they encrypted all of the law office's data. They demanded a ransom that was all the money they had in the bank minus 1 payroll. They need the criminals need them to stay in business to pay them the money, but they want to get every bit they can. If they know if they ransom them for too much money, the business would just declare bankruptcy. So they're able to tailor that ransom to exactly the amount that they know the business can actually pay without completely going out of business. Again, that was a real attack that happened not too long ago and not too far away from here either. So these are the reasons that the insurance companies are requiring their clients to put some basic cybersecurity in place at this point. Everybody's a target, and the insurance companies have paid out millions of dollars over the past 2 years, and they're looking to make sure that their clients are secure.
So John, what does this look like from your perspective, from the insurance perspective?
Well, from the perspective, those companies that are taking the aggressive attitude and going out there and are dealing with people like Cliff and going in and having a good assessment of their programs, the companies that are doing that, their ransom, the insurance companies are seeing a 50% decline in ransomware demands because they're able to stop it. It takes time to get in there and get everybody trained to do that. So everybody says, well, I'm going to do that soon, or I'm going to do that next year when I can put it in the budget. But now is the time to make the decision. It's as Cliff and I've talked many times, I tell him, from an insurance standpoint, I started working and really delving into cyber insurance issues and cyber hacking and all the things that are associated with cyber problems. Then about 5 years ago, in fact, I did it when I was asked to do a presentation for the chamber, and it really intrigued me to the point that I've spent a lot of time going to seminars and listening to different things, and it's just amazing to me how when you boil it all down to the very essence, it's very basic. If we take approach of being very sensitive to doing the things that we're supposed to do, that we can really save ourselves a lot of heartache, a lot of money, and we can make sure that our customers are protected. And one of the things that people are seeing now is one of the newer things is it's been happening little by little, but a company will get this urgent email in saying that you haven't paid your federal or state taxes, and so if you don't pay them in the next 24 hours, you're going to lose your ability to be able to function as a business, and or we'll come in and do something. So they see this urgency. That seems like every time you see the word urgency or immediate, you need to be aware. That's a red flag to watch out and look. But they're coming in and saying you owe them money, and you don't. And it'd be a perfect time to do it when the boss is out of town, like Cliff said, to try to get in the back door. So just be careful. If it looks like something you don't know, take it seriously.
Mhm. So our webinar today is my business really vulnerable to cyber attack? And we know the answer is yes. Cliff, do you think, just to go forward from here, what do I do about this as a business owner? What's my next step?
Sure. So cybersecurity can be overwhelming. It's just one more thing to do. Especially business owners and bosses, they have so much on their plate already. Just even thinking about cybersecurity can feel overwhelming. It can also be overwhelming because it's not something that is the same as it was before. Things have changed, even literally over the past year, over the last 18 months, things have changed. What was secure 3 years ago is not even close to secure now. The hackers are always changing their tactics. It's not something that shows up as instant return. There are a lot of other fires that people have to put out. So it can be hard to think about it. But the problem is that it really does only take one click on the wrong thing, and suddenly you're ransomed, and it can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, and put your business in serious trouble. So really the first thing to do is to analyze your network to see what your security posture is. And that's something that we love to help people with. We can absolutely help do a security analysis. That's the first place to start. Find out what your vulnerabilities are. Find out what's the most important. So we can actually do the analysis. We can help you walk through what's the highest priority. What do we need to worry about first? What are the biggest holes in the network? So we can actually do the pen test to help people analyze their network. The second piece, building off of that, is to develop a work plan. So once you've found out, once we've walked through, okay, where are the holes? What do we need to do to plug those holes? So developing a work plan to get the most critical things fixed first, and then work towards the lesser priority issues. Reviewing your cyber insurance policy is critical. Going to your agent and finding out, hey, do I have any coverage? What coverage do I need? Different industries are going to have different needs. Different people will have different stuff. But it's really critical to review that and find out where you are. The other piece that we offer is a cyber insurance readiness assessment. We can help you walk through that before you go to your agent, or as part of the conversation with your agent, to find out if you're close to ready. What do we need to do to actually get these things in place? Again, just as we mentioned at the top, you don't want to just check the boxes off. You really need to make sure that you're doing what you say you're doing, because claims are being denied. And so, some very practical things that you can do to help secure your network and secure your data, using secure email. As I mentioned before, unsecure email, free email is just a huge security hole. So getting business grade email in place is critical. Using two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication is another critical piece. By putting that in place on email, that can actually reduce, some huge number of attacks. A lot of attacks take place just because it's so easy to get into people's email. By putting that 2FA in place, it makes it a lot harder for hackers to get in. Using password management software is another really practical thing that can be done. That will keep your passwords in an encrypted location. That way, hackers don't easily have access to them. Almost inevitably, almost every single penetration test that we've ever done, we found passwords that have been cracked. It's so easy for hackers to do that. And many of them get sold out on the dark web. So we're constantly monitoring, those credentials out there for our clients, because those hacked passwords get sold out on the internet. So using some password management software can help prevent that. And then really almost the most critical thing is backup. Backup. Have backup in place. Make sure that it's monitored. Make sure that it's being tested regularly. Make sure that it's encrypted and it can't be damaged by the hackers, again, that's the first thing that a ransomware attacker is going to do, is go to try and damage your backup. There are just countless stories of people not being able to recover because they didn't have backup in place, or thought they did and it wasn't running, or thought it was running and the bits weren't in place. So backup is just almost the most critical piece of your security plan. So those are just a few practical things that people can do to be secure.
Yeah, and I want to thank you both for sharing just your experience that you've had in both of these areas. I think we've got some time for some questions that we've got in. So one of them is, John, how do I know if I'm being charged a fair price for cyber insurance? I think that's a fair question. Is there anything that we can be on the lookout for?
Yes, there is. And it just depends. I will tell you, the cost of cyber insurance has increased pretty dramatically over the last 3 to 4 years because of the fact that companies are just not taking the time to protect themselves. And so they're leaving the company wide open for exposure, them and the company. So it's sitting down with an agent and making sure that you have, price is always is one thing, but making sure that that price is giving you exactly what you need. So it's sitting down and getting a good assessment of what you need for your particular business. And do you need to have a standalone policy, or will one that if you have an existing policy and you add an endorsement onto it, will that be enough, or do you need a standalone policy? What are you buying? Is it a good value for what you're getting? And has the carrier, the agent shopped it with several companies to give you a comparison? That's another thing. I actually have 4 companies that I have a lot of faith in. One of them I think is probably head and shoulders above the rest of them, but they cost a little bit more, but they provide an awful lot more service. So it's just a matter of making sure that you've got the right things, the right tools in place to protect you, to give you the help that you need when you have a loss. One of the companies that I work with, they guarantee that they will be in contact with a policy holder within 5 minutes of a claim being reported, and that they will have somebody on site within just a few hours, depending on the location, to start assessing and finding out what the problem is. Many times, as Cliff will tell you, you don't know what to do until you find out exactly where the point of entry was, what happened and how it got there, so that you can eradicate it and start working from there. So it's just a matter of sitting down as a policyholder with your agent and asking them several basic questions. Number one, what experience do you have in writing cyber insurance? And number two, have you looked the market over to make sure that the price that I'm being charged is competitive? So those are the only 2 things that you can do, is rely on a good agent that has experience in the area to evaluate it properly, and rely on them just like you do Cliff or anyone that you're asking for help to bring that professional and equitable and integrity to the process of writing your coverage.
Another question we've got is, how do you see businesses falling short right now from an insurance perspective?
Well, I think as I said earlier, only 14% of the businesses that are small businesses have coverage. So it's just a matter of sitting down and finding out, what do I need? Naturally, somebody that's running a small coffee shop doesn't need the same kind of coverage as somebody that has multiple locations. And another thing that most of the people forget is that asking your vendors, the people that provide you services, that you getting information, like small businesses use a lot of point of service providers, where, when they process your credit cards and the purchase of things, what kind of protection do they have to protect the information that you're providing through them? That's a good question to ask too. So making sure that your vendors are protected and that they're offering you protection. and that if something happens, what are they going to do to provide you protection?
Mhm.
Just if I can piggyback on that for a minute, it's important to find out from your agent, what it is that you need. A lot of people don't really know what their vulnerabilities are. For example, a lot of nonprofits think that there's no data that's important. We don't have anything that's important. So we're not likely to be attacked. But the reality is nonprofits hold databases of donors who are often big dollar donors. And so hackers know that is prime data for them. That's where their money is. So, even again, a small nonprofit that thinks that they don't have anything really does have risk. They do have things that are valuable to hackers. And so when you're having that conversation with your insurance agent, finding out, where is it that I'm really vulnerable? It's a kind of a critical question.
Well, Cliff, you're exactly right. Now, I've got a list of things that we always put out to ours. If you have any of these things in your possession, then you're vulnerable. And that's social security numbers, credit card numbers, account numbers, any financial data, trademark information, and copyright information. So there's all kinds of things out there that people have that they don't realize. And you're exactly right. One of the biggest vulnerabilities are churches and which also fall in the category of nonprofits. They have an awful lot of financial information, people that are donors, and many of them get things like cars and things like that. So people can run scams on that too. So
Yeah, I guess, John, are there any like minimum cybersecurity items or I guess what I mean is, are there current requirements for your clients already? Are there any minimum cybersecurity requirements they need to meet in order to come on?
I tell you, that is the fastest changing part of cyber insurance that we have. I was on a 2-hour conference call last week where companies were talking about beefing up their requirements to kind of give you an idea how hard it is to get cyber insurance now. Let's see, I had it here. Here it is. This was put out last month, August, that 37% of the applicants for cyber insurance were turned down the first time. And the reason being is that they didn't take even the minimum requirements that the companies had for protecting their assets and their data assets. So it's very vulnerable. That's why it's important to sit down with a provider like Cliff and with an insurance agent that understands it and really knows your business. Because if you don't understand your client's business, then it's really, really hard to help them tailor. Everybody's a little different. And it's kind of like a cafeteria. You sit there and you go through the line, and we know we need this, and we need this, and we need this. And do you have the means for being able to protect it? One of the things that I talked about a little bit, but you get into liability issues with this. Somebody like we mentioned, the real estate people and lawyers were getting sued by the fund transfers that happened. Well, that can happen to you too. Information gets out, HIPAA rules and requirements are breached, and information gets out there and they use it, or people take information and utilize it against some of your clients. It really leaves you vulnerable. What is the insurance company going to do? Are they going to come in to protect you? They're going to provide you with a defense? Will they help you with the litigation cost as well as the liability funds that may be required of you because of a court action? And what are you going to do with the publicity? Most of the companies will provide you with someone that will help with the newspapers, televisions, whatever, depending on how big an issue it is, to help you to protect yourself. You don't want to lose your good name as a business because you've been vulnerable. And I think first time I ever heard about it was years ago when I remember Target and Walmart and Home Depot and the rest of them got hacked and all this information was out there. And believe it or not, the federal government just announced this week that some tax returns information were left open on the web, and people were able to see what people's information had. So, I mean, it happens to the federal government, it happens to businesses. So everybody has to be on the lookout, and to be able to respond, you got to sit down and have those long, difficult questions. It's not a quick fix. It's a process where you sit down and you work through it. And like Cliff had mentioned earlier, and he was right, it's a process. You start with the low-hanging fruit and you work up, and you keep adding to it, and you keep on and on and on. But having a good assessment from somebody that understands what's going on is the real key, and being able to plug those gaps. Is everything 100%? No. That's why you have insurance. That's the safety net behind that. You do the best job you can with protecting it with the software and all the things that are available to you, all those tools, and then you have the insurance as your safety net to help you in the event that something does manage to come through. I think all of us agree is that there's a new thing, a new catch, a new crime that comes out every day that these criminals are thinking up. If they'd put their efforts into something practical, it would be amazing what we could get done. So.
Cliff, did you have any thoughts on that too?
Well, one of the things Sean mentioned was the kind of the reporting or the reputational damage. For some industries, for example, medical, there's a requirement for public reporting if you get a breach. And I've seen instances where people have had a printer that got hacked from somebody. Well, in terms of HIPAA, that's a breach. Somebody's gotten into your network. They potentially had access to data, and you have to report that publicly. So you should absolutely have your disaster recovery plan in place, but also you need to have that covered from an insurance perspective to make sure that you have somebody in place to do all that reporting for you, to do it in the right way, and in the way that kind of mitigates any kind of other external reputational damage as well. So that's kind of a critical piece. The other thing I'll just mention, it's up on the screen, but with the pen test, the penetration test is the first kind of assessment from a technical perspective to see where you are security-wise. So we're doing an offer for a free penetration test. The URL is up there on the screen. So again, we'd love to run the test for you. We'd love to take a look at your network with you and kind of see where you're at, and then make some decisions going from there.
I don't know if we have time for one more question, but I'll sneak one in. John, what is something that from a business owner perspective, I want to have included in my cyber insurance coverage? Is there something that I should be on the lookout for?
Well, I think looking in there for what kind of response you're going to get. Now, there are two different kinds of policies that you can get. You can get one that's going to pay you back on the expenses that you incur as a result of the hack or the bad deed that's done, or you can get one that pays as you incur expenses. So that's the thing. Are you able to absorb those initial costs yourself and then present your claim at the end, and the company pay you your loss minus your deductible, or would you rather have monies up front? So that's one thing to look at. Another thing to look at is, are you going to get on-site help? Or are they just going to do it long distance? What do you need? The other thing is how quickly are they going to respond? What kind of response time are you going to get? Are you going to get people that are dedicated to do it? Are you going to get a claims adjuster to do it? Are you going to get somebody that is actually on the cyber team for a particular company that is trained in cybersecurity issues and responding to them and working through that? So it's just a matter of asking those questions, and many times the agents are going to have to go back to the company, and some of the companies that we have really want to have a direct contact with the policyholder and talk to them. So those are things to look for. It's a team effort. It's not a one-off, it's a team effort. It's your what are you doing for your your cyber, what's your defense for cyber, and then what are you doing to make sure that it's maintained on a day-to-day basis. And the one thing that I'll say about it is the biggest critical error that you can find is that there's not enough communication within a business with the employees. When you have a new person coming on, the first thing that you need to do is talk to them about the vulnerabilities. You can talk about the things that came out of some of the things that we've talked about today. You talk to them, but have regular meetings with your people. Don't let it be just a one-off. Well, everybody be aware of cybersecurity. No, it's a continuing thing. And I know Cliff offers this, and that you can get it from many different ways, is to have ongoing training for people. I know my office, we send out examples of phishing just to see if people will pick it up in emails. So having training going on like that, and then having little vignettes that the people read, little 5-minute videos that they look at, just to reinforce the basics of security. And it's the little things that make as much difference as the big things. So when you get people trained to look, stop, listen, and think before they react. So
to close our timeout today, do you guys have any further comments or things that we should be taking away into the rest of the week?
I think for me, again, just to go back to, get started, get an assessment done, see where you are. It can easily look overwhelming from the beginning, but get the assessment, see where you are to start with. Making just a little bit of effort can really help you a lot going forward.
John, do you have any more thoughts?
Right. Well, the most expensive thing you can do in your business is to do nothing about cybersecurity. We call it it's a digital tsunami that is out there. I've seen it growing year after year after year. And the reality is it is here, it's coming. It's almost like you look at it like you do the COVID, how many people didn't have it? Now all of a sudden, just about everybody, somebody in everybody's families had it. So the same thing true with cyber hacking and cyber issues and cyber crimes. Everybody's vulnerable in your personal life and in your business life. So just be careful. To be forewarned is to be forearmed, and be armed with good cyber tools such as BIT Services offered, and to deal with an insurance professional that understands cyber and all the crimes and all the issues that are involved in it.
Well, thank you both for sharing today. We definitely appreciate you both.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Close us out. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.